Welcome back to another session of ATC 2020. My name is Andreas Johansson. I'm the Director of Operations at Streetsboro City Schools. With me, I have Dan Stitzel. He's up there in that yellow hoodie. Dan Stitzel is going to be my co-host. He's going to monitor our chat. Any questions, so please utilize that. We are asking that you remain on mute, but we would love to see you on camera if you are able to. We are only going to record sort of the speaker on camera, so no worries, you won't be out there. But if you want to say hello and we want to see you, and there's Missy Payton from Streetsboro too. She's got a mask on, so it's good. And Stephanie's there, and we're gonna have a good time. Make sure that you open that demo sheet. Otherwise, some of these things might be a little bit, fast and furious. But we're gonna go ahead and get started here. So I'm gonna share my screen. If you have questions, put them in the chat. And of course, we're offering a certificate of attendance. We're recording it, so you can go back, check all that good stuff. So should be no problem. I'm going to share. I'm going to see what happens here. I'm not 100% sure what happens if I share desktop 1, and what happens if I go present. Dan, what do we see? Do you see my slides? All right, sounds good. So welcome. Beautiful data with Google Sheets. We're going to go through them here, but here's your demo sheet. Grab the link from the chat window. That'll be a lot easier for you. That'll open it all up. Here's what we're going to preview, some concepts. We're going to look at the basics in a spreadsheet. I'll show you how I typically work with data if it comes to me from a vendor or some other source like a Google form. We're going to look at sorting data. We're going to look at filtering data. We're going to look at how to validate data, and then how to change it into various different forms, and how to format it. And hopefully we'll get through all of that, because there's a lot to it. Some of it might be basics for you depending on where you are at in your spreadsheet knowledge, but some of it tends to be intermediate and maybe even advanced. Here's how I approach spreadsheet data. I say, make the data work for you. So typically in education or around these areas, we get a lot of different data from vendors. We get different data from tests. We get them from assessments, from formative, summative assessments. And a lot of that gets dumped into a spreadsheet or a CSV. How we then handle that and sort of make it work for us is the key to success. I see a lot of people struggle with it, so we want to try to avoid that. Here's how I do that. Let's see here. Boom. We fix the data. That's the #1 step. I fix it, and then we sort it, and then we use it. And so we want to try to get an idea of, like, what is this data? What does it look like? And how can we get it done? So we're going to look at some of those things, and then that'll be a review for you. So I'm going to exit out of here. I'm going to move into this copy of the spreadsheet that I shared with you, and I'm going to try to make it as large as I can here, but just knowing that it can get a little bit difficult, but we'll figure it out. So here's a typical spreadsheet, and this is what I get. So I'm in the Basics tab, and I get just like a host of data, and I don't even know what it is. And so I'm going to share some things with you that I typically do. To be fair, and so we got rows go this way, columns go up and down. So rows left to right, columns up and down. So when we're looking at rows 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then columns A, B, C, D, is what we're looking at. So we're going to adjust that a little bit. Now, what you could do is you can come in here for each column, and you can sort of like drag it. So you can say, okay, column A, I'm going to see if I can drag it, and then see, whatever so I can see whatever the values are in there. The tricky thing about that is that if this is a spreadsheet that has 5,000 rows or even 100 rows, I'll have to scroll all the way down, and it just gets really messy. So all you got to do is double click. So put your arrow so that it makes the right sort of, it's like a black arrow right to the right of column A. Double click, and it'll automatically widen the column to the widest format, or the widest value in that cell. You can then, of course, apply that to the rest of the columns. And so if you highlight, and I just click on A there, I click and drag over, highlight columns A through G, and then I can do that on any of them. I put my arrow key right in the middle, and sort of the border turns blue. I double click, and now the spreadsheet has widened all of those columns according to whatever the values are in the cell. Sometimes that gets really messed up if you have like a long question in there, if you've collected some qualitative data, but in this case, I'm looking at, it looks to me like roster data. So that's what we're looking at. The other thing that happens then is as I'm starting to look at this data, like it kind of looks like I have a bunch of similarities over here. And I can sort of start making out that maybe those are like teacher names, you know, and then over here looks like student data. And then this probably looks like period and like course section. So what I want to do is I want to identify that, and I don't want to have like mystery data. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark row 1, and then I'm going to right click, and I'm going to say insert a row above so that I can name the data myself. So I'm going to say insert a row above, and then I'm just going to guess. I'm going to say first name, and I like to use capital letters for the headings. And then I'm going to say period, because I think that's what it is. And then I'm going to say course, and then I'm going to say T first, oops, and then T last, because I have a feeling that this is sort of teacher's first, last name, things like that. Then I double click again so that it moves out. Now, what happens if I scroll down? Here's what happens to a lot of people. They start scrolling. Well, what happened to the headers? Oh no, now like they're gone. So here's how you do it. A couple different ways to freeze that header, and you can freeze rows and you can freeze columns. I'll show you 2 different ways. The first way, which I had no idea you could do until like just last year, someone showed it to me because I was doing it the other way. You go into the view menu, you go to freeze, and you say freeze 1 row. Boom. And watch what happens. You get this dark gray freezer row, and now watch what happens when I scroll. Hooray, top row is frozen, so it doesn't move. So now I know what that data is. I can also do that the same thing. I can come in and view, and I can say freeze a column, so 1 column. So if I'm scrolling to the right, that stays. And so now I can scroll and be a little bit more effective in my spreadsheet, because otherwise I lose kind of the ideas of what is happening. Now I can do it a different way, and this is typically what I do because it's just faster than going to the menu. You can also sort of hover right here where that gray bar is, and you see that you get that little white hand, and that's might be difficult to see over the Zoom call, but you get a little white hand. So click and drag, and then you can just freeze as many rows or columns as you want, and that's quicker. So that's typically what I do. I come up here to that top left-hand cell that has nothing in it. I grab the row and I just go bloop, and then my top row is frozen, and now I know what my data is. The other thing I do is I don't like, so if you're looking at row 1, I don't like where data is kind of, you know, I don't know, it's not centered, but it's like bottom adjusted or up, you know, top most adjusted in the cell or whatever it might be. So I like to have everything in the center of the cell, but that depends on the data for you. But in this case, that's what I want. So I'm going to highlight the whole spreadsheet by clicking here. So that's in that top box. The other way to do it quickly is to do either Control A or Command A on a Mac. Control A on a PC, Command A, that selects the whole kit and caboodle. And then I come over here to my horizontal alignment button, and I say I want it to be left adjusted, and I want it to be middle adjusted, so like sort of center adjusted. That way just it works better for me. So that's what I like. You can do whatever you want, but I think working with spreadsheets, you want to try to set some standards for yourself so that it becomes usable for you, because otherwise it just becomes difficult to work with. So think about some of those things as we go along today. The other thing I like to do is just to be real clear, like what is the header row? So I just click on the number 1 there. That selects the whole header row. And then I might fill it with like an easy to see color. And then I know that that's the header row. Bing, bang, boom. So far, so good. Now I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to see, I like to have an idea of like, okay, well, how big is this data set? I'm going to scroll and scroll and scroll. Okay, 400 something, right? 396 rows. Now, what I like to do is I don't like to have extra rows. If I'm inheriting some data from somewhere, I want to have as few rows as possible that are blank, because I just want to work with my data. So I delete them. Here's how you do that. Quick and dirty, you highlight the row that is blank, and then here's some keyboard shortcuts. And this is where it comes into that intermediate use of spreadsheets. Hold on your Control and Shift key, or Command and Shift, and hit the down arrow. And now I've selected all of the rows all the way down to the end of the sheet. And then I just right-click, delete rows. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm scrolling to the right, and I see a bunch of extra columns that I don't need. So I'm going to highlight column G, and you guessed it, Command Shift or Control Shift. I'm going to hold those down, and then right arrow, boom. And it'll select all of them. And I'm going to right-click on one of the columns, and I'm going to say delete columns G through Y. So now I have a much smaller data set. And so What's the benefit? It's easier to maneuver around. You don't have a bunch of extra space that you don't really need. And Google Sheets will maneuver a lot faster for you. I do primarily most of the stuff that I do spreadsheet-wise in Google Sheets. Sometimes I will say I'll move into Excel, and that is if I'm looking at a data set that pertains to like all of our students. So if I were to pull a data set that says like all students, all courses, everything, that's going to be almost 50,000 rows, and I don't even know, like maybe 30 columns. That's a big sheet. I'm going to do that in Excel, but that's for a different day. Okay, so now we're looking at first name, last name, period, course, for teacher first, teacher last. Now, if my own standard is I like to go and work by last names, and so I'm going to want that to be the leftmost column. How do I do that? I see a lot of people, they'll like insert another column and then they'll literally like type, like move it over. In Google Sheets, super easy. You just highlight column B, and then when it's highlighted, so I click here on the column header, then you get a hand, you get that white hand, click and hold, watch what happens, and I just go blue, click and drag it over. I just said move that column over. Just a heads up, you can't do that if they're frozen. So if my column was frozen, you'll get an error message. You unfreeze the column, move it, refreeze it. So here I'm going to grab that, freeze it. So now if I'm scrolling, if I get a bigger sheet, it's good to go. All right, so now we talked a little bit about the data, so we want to sort it just a little bit. I have an idea, because we're seeing here, like now, it looks like it's in alphabetical order by student last name. But what if we want it differently, right? So a quick way to do that is mark the whole sheet like that, or Control or Command A. Go into Data, and then we're going to do a sort range. Now you have some other options here. You have sort sheet by column, blah, 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 and we'll get to that. But just go to sort range. And then you'll get a sort of a selector. And of course, we do have a data header row. So we labeled our headers, so we can sort by the headers. And notice what happens here. If I don't have a header row, then sort by column A. But if I do, it automatically picks up, oh, what do you want to sort by? And you can sort by multiple things. So I'm going to start by sorting by last name, and then I'm going to add another one, and I'm going to sort by first name. And that's going to be our first sort. And then notice you can sort A to Z or Z to A. So your choice. So I'm going to click sort. So now I know that this is sorted by first name and then last name. So here we have Acker, Catherine, and then Adante, Benjamin, Cooper, so on and so forth. So seems to work. We have two Andersons, Samantha, and Tyler. So that seems to be pretty good. Now, what if I wanted it by teacher last and first? So again, what I would do is I would kind of just, drag that over there. So get the teacher last names involved, and then let's do it. So highlight the whole sheet, go to Data, go to Sort Range, and then say where you have a data header row. But now I'm going to sort by teacher last name, and then maybe teacher first name, right? And then I want it sorted by last name and by first name, right? So now we're going to sort by the teacher, and then I'm going to click OK. So now we see that we get a different data set. So now we have Austin, Janet Austin, right? And we have all of Janet Austin's kids. Here they are. And then we have all of Karen Bechtel's kids. And then we have all of Andy Van Dunes, and so on and so forth. So lots of ways to sort it. And notice we haven't deleted any data. We haven't done anything with it. And I'm going to show you even a quicker, faster way to sort it. So far, so good. Dan, do we have any questions in chat?
Not at this point.
Not at this point. Everyone's overwhelmed, probably by the spreadsheet. That's okay. We'll keep going. So this is some basics. The other thing I like to do, and I like to sort of, it is what it is, but I like to have my special fonts that I work in. I'll mark the whole sheet. I like to work with this font that's called Inconsolata or Inconsolata, however you say it. And then I like to work in size 10. And the reason I do that is because that's easy to read. The characters really stand out for each other. And I will say the difference being, right, if I'm working in a spreadsheet and I go in and I use a font like this, like Amatic, it's really hard. So, do what works for you. Find a font that works for you. Arial rounded maybe, depending on what it is that you're doing. But Inconsolata or Courier New or something like that have like sort of spaced out letters tend to work a lot easier for spreadsheet use. Okay, so now let's filter some data. So that was sorting it. It was pretty easy sorts. We just sorted by the header column. And remember, you have to have the header column named in order for you to sort by it. So that's step one, insert a new one if it doesn't exist. I'm going to make this bold too, because I like that. I like that to stand out on my header. So now I want to be able to filter it out. So what I mean by filtering is I only want to see Janet Austin students, but I don't want to delete the rest of the sheet. So I see a lot of people, they'll get this data, they'll finally get it sorted, and then they'll just delete everything. So like delete. Well, then you can't really use it. You can't really share it with someone else. It's beneficial if you take data, share it with others, work collaboratively, and then filter and use the data that you need. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to highlight the whole spreadsheet again. And then we're going to maneuver up here in the toolbar. And this is difficult because we're zoomed in, but we're going to look for this button that says create filter. It looks like a champagne glass or a martini glass, I think. And we're just going to click there. We're going to go bloop. And what you'll get is you'll get some of these green sort of drop-down menus for each column header. Now that means that we can do things. So not only can we sort very quickly, so we can say, we'll come in here, sort it A to Z by column A. Boom, now it's sorted back, or sort by first name or sort by period. But we can also filter. And so filtering is bringing it from that wide data set. That's why it's the martini glass is like a funnel, right? So we want to filter it into the data that we want. In this case, I only want to see Tracy Frater. So we're going to pick on Tracy here. We're only going to pick on, select Tracy Frater students. So here's how we do it. We come into the last name and we're going to click there and we're going to scroll down and say, well, instead of showing all of these values, and look at how it reads through that whole column, it knows that there are values in there and it knows what they are. And so now you can say, well, show me only what's checked. So I'm going to start by saying clear. And then I'm going to say select Frater. And then I'm going to click OK. And then you'll see that everything else goes away. And now we only have results from Tracy Frater. Does that make sense so far? And then we can still say now sort it by last name or whatever it is that you want to do. But now we're only seeing these records from Tracy Frater. Now notice over here on the rows. So now you have row 2, 3, 8, 12, 16, 17, right? All of the other ones are gone. They're filtered out. You'll notice then here that your data is filtered by the column that has that little champagne flute or the martini glass or the funnel filter. So if you want to undo that, you can say, well, show me Frater and Austin. You can do that. Click OK. And now you have Frater and Austin. And then see how they're mixed in? So we want to separate them. You just say sort A through Z. And then we have Austin first and then Frater later. So very, very powerful, especially when you're looking at large data sets, to be able to filter down by unique items. And in this case, it is teacher data. It's teacher sort of roster data, right? You can do the same thing with students. So if you want to compare students and you want to say, let's not find everyone, but we only want to see Adante, Alvarez, Chincola, Corda, and Davia, we can do that. And now we're looking at only a certain number of students. All the other data is secure. It's there. It's not deleted. And at any time you can highlight and sort of see, okay, we have it filtered by last name and we also have it filtered by last name over here. So I can come in and say, just select all, right? Okay, and then come in here and say, select all, and then you're good to go. Now you're back to the full data set. So very powerful in order to sort and filter your data in order to do, make it do what you want it to do. So that's a little bit about cleaning up some basics, some fonts and formatting, sorting the whole data set, and then, or sorting the range rather, and then doing a little bit of filtering. There's some other ways that you can do filters. You can build some custom filters for your team to say, hey, teacher X, I want, here's a filter that you can just look at your kids. And that way you can then share the filter itself and not have to mess with the data. And they don't really have to be super proficient in doing it. But you could create filters for them. So sometimes when we work and I see Missy's on here and Dan's obviously on here, like we might work with a team of teachers and say, we're going to take your data and we're going to build some filters for you so that you don't have to have all of this necessarily core knowledge of sheets, but it's good to be able to do it on your own. All right, we're going to move on. We're going to do some fun stuff. We're going to move to lists. So if you're with me there, go ahead and move over to the lists tab. I see a lot of people struggle in Sheets because it's too much and you're typing stuff out. A lot of us do lists a lot of the time, like either the months or the numbers or whatever. Google Sheets will do some of this for you and it understands what it is that you're wanting to do. All you have to do is give it 3 values. And so in this case, you have 1, 2, 3, and you could type 4, 5, 6, 7, but Google understands what it is. And so all you got to do is I click on the 1 and I drag it down and highlight the 3. And then right here at the bottom corner, I'm going to grab that little blue box and I'm going to click and hold, and I'm going to continue to drag, and I get a list, and it just does it for me because it understands this is what I want to do. January, February, March, that's a logical sequence. And so it knows to do that. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, right? It'll do the whole week of the month, you know, like it understands what that is. Same thing with years, right? It can count, and months, it understands that. Oops. And so you can get a whole calendar. Even actually, so this value then, right, even kind of understands like what year it is depending on when you started. And then column F, that's where it gets a little bit tricky, like yellow, green, pink. It does not understand what that is. And so when I click and drag here, we're just going to get sort of a repetition of those patterns. Same thing with high, medium, and low. Doesn't really understand that. But quick and easy to make calendars, quick and easy to make lists so that you don't have to type it. And again, of course, it'll do, you know, so if you do with capital Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, it'll do that and it'll repeat it for you. Same thing if you were to just write it out, would be no problem. So far, so good. That's a little bit about lists, just some fun things. We're going to jump back to formulas now, just so you have an idea of what can happen. We'll just do a few here. I have some numbers here, and we're going to look at sum, average, unique, and count because they're pretty easy. And Google, as Google Sheets has evolved, has become even more intuitive. And so one of the things that our students do, and sometimes that we do, is just sum it, and that just add everything up. And so any formula that we do is going to start with an equal sign, and it's going to just start like this. I'm going to say equal. I'm going to scroll down here just so you can see it, equal. And then this hopefully will pop up for you. I love it. It makes an assumption already. Like it looks at the cells above and it says, looks like you want to sum B2 to B16. So you don't even have to think about that. So you can just kind of select and say, yep, I do. And then you'll see the formula that you would have to know otherwise, and it'll help you with it. So it'll say equal, sum, parenthesis, B2, which is the cell at the top, B16, which is the cell at the bottom, and you just hit enter and you just totaled it together. And then if one of these numbers change, right, it'll auto calculate, and that's the beauty of it. I see a lot of people doing manual calculations. They'll have data in a spreadsheet, and then they don't ask the spreadsheet to calculate, and then they have to like manually calculate with a calculator, and that becomes real difficult. Average is the same thing, starts with an equal sign, and guess what? The average formula is average, and so you just select the average C2 to C16, 44.6. And again, if that changes, it'll recalculate it for you automatically. Unique will kind of show how many unique values there are. And so that's just one that you could use depending on what it is that you want it to do. And then here, you're going to have to select it. So the way that works is to say, well, show me unique, and I'm going to drag, whoops, drag down here, hit enter, and then it's going to make me a list underneath of what the unique values are. Unique's a little bit more like you want to see some typical things. And then count, it can do the same thing. Counting will just count how many values you have in range. And so, oops, hard to scroll when we have small type. So it'll just say how many, so count, the count formula just says how many values do we have, and we have 15. Doesn't add anything up, it just says how many values do we have. So for example, you could do a count value of, I have a bunch of t-shirt orders, how many larges do we need, how many smalls do we need, it'll do that for you. So that's a little bit about the formulas, but I want to show you, want to get to some of the good stuff. So we're going to skip the if formula. If you have questions about that, let me know, we'll help you out. We're going to do some concatenate because that is one that I use all the time, and it's one that tends to be pretty useful, especially for anyone who wants to generate usernames or otherwise. Concatenate puts things together. So concatenate will take any data that you have in a spreadsheet and it'll put it together for you. So if I wanted to make an email out of this roster data here, the first thing I would do, right, is I would, of course, insert above, and I would say first name, last name, and then I'm going to have an email here. And then I'm going to lock it so that it doesn't go anywhere. And what I can do is I can then say, put this stuff together and then automate it. So concatenate, start with an equal sign, concat, and always go down to concatenate. Concat, the formula concat will only do 2 values. Concatenate will do multiples. And then it basically just put 2 strings together or more. And in this case, we're going to start with this one, and then we're going to select that one. And the way to separate them is you put in a comma. And what I love in Google Sheets is that it tells you how to build the formulas. And so if you're not sure about it, you do have to spend a little time with it. So it does take a little while to noodle on some of this stuff, but you put it together, you learn, you see what works, and then you figure it out. And that's how I learned it. That's how it's one effective way of learning. So I have A2, I have a B2, and then I'm going to close it with a parenthesis, and then I'm going to go there. And great, you know, but it doesn't look like an email address. Well, you can do more with this. So we double click into here. What we really want is we also want the email address. And so anything that you do in text-wise within Google Sheet, you have to put it in double quotes. And this is typically where I lose some people, and that's okay. Just rewind the tape and watch it and take it nice and slow. But I'm going to put in double quotes, and then I'm going to say at mail.com, and then I'm going to close that with double quotes. And you can tell up here that it's starting to build it for you. So again, how do you want it to look? What looks good? Does it work? Et cetera, et cetera. I'm going to hit enter. So that starts to look more like an email address. And again, I'm just putting stuff together. Why is that important? Let me show you. I'll zoom out a little bit because then we're going to repeat all of these and we're going to make it super simple so that you don't have to do extra work. Now I want a period in there. So since we're not live chatting, I'm going to just put in a double quote, a period, and a double quote, and then a comma. And so I'm going to add my period in there. Now watch this. Here's the beauty. Once I have the formula, I can then click and drag, and I can automate, and now I'm getting a bunch of the same stuff. And I want to show you one more thing that I really like, and that is to come into this formula and say, I want to concatenate, but I also want to lower stuff. Whoops. And I want to make everything lowercase. And so instead of struggling and retyping it, Sheets can do that. So I said, make everything lower, concatenate A2 and B2, and add the mail.com, call it a day. So that's how to quickly put stuff together in Google Sheets. I know that can be a little bit over the top. That's probably more intermediate advanced stuff. But what I want you to know is that that's available to you. So it's spreadsheets are there to sort of help you work more effectively. And if you have questions, just let us know. We're happy to help you. Should be no problem. Someone's calling. Hold on. So that's that. That's a little bit about concatenating. We're going to move to conditional formatting. So follow me in the spreadsheet, conditional formatting. Here we have a database that looks like a bunch of books is what they are. And so I'm going to quickly run through and do my sort of my cleanup here. And I'm going to delete the top row because that was not there. I have my title row. Remember, I like to make it yellow. I can resize some stuff so I can start seeing the data on DRA level. So if you're into reading and genres and book levels and whatnot, right? We can see then how many we have left and things like that. There's quantity and we'll guided reading level. If you're an educator, you know what some of these things are. I'm going to then quickly go in and say, I'm going to highlight the whole sheet. So this is building on what we did before. Then I'm going to go in and say, I'm going to filter that. And then we can sort by whatever we want. So we can sort by the title. We can sort by the author. So now it's already like within just 15 seconds, a usable spreadsheet. We can also sort by DRA level. And so those are numbers. And so the spreadsheets understand what those are. Same thing with the guided reading level. Fiction we could sort by, right? And then obviously we have quantity, how many we have left. What we can do is we can use something called conditional formatting, where we allow the spreadsheet to kind of highlight visually some things that we would want it to do. So we're going to look at the DRA level, and we're going to color coordinate from high to low. And so I start by highlighting column C, and then I go into format, and then conditional formatting. So formatting, conditional formatting, I've highlighted column C. And then it says apply to the range, that's the whole thing. Instead of single color, because that basically just shows is there a value there, we're going to go over the color scale. And I don't like this one, so I like a color scale sort of like this, if that works. Or the reverse of that, I think, is what we want. Let's see, so that lowest red or highest, you can select whatever you want. You could then even tell it what is the minimum value, what is the percentile, which is at the center value, and then what's the max value. But we're going to stay nice and simple. So we'll just do sort of a quick conditional formatting, click done. This doesn't do anything to the data other than make it stand out visually, so that if we sort by author, we can have a quick idea of like what is the DRA level, is it high or low based on conditional formatting. Now, why do some of these not fit in the mold? It says 40 to 42, because Sheets doesn't understand that that's a range. So what I would do is then you would come in, clean it up, and then we'll say 40. And this one seems the 18 one, so we'll fix it, and then it'll kind of mark it accordingly to the color scale. And then you can see that the whole color scale changes because now the top value is 80. And if we were to sort by the DRA level, we would have green at the bottom, and then as we go up, you'll see that it gets higher and higher and higher and higher, and then into the reds, into the reds, into the reds, into the reds, into the reds. And then we have all these ranges here that are uncharted. And so that's an easy way to kind of work with your data to make it look good. You could do it based off of words as well. So if you wanted to come in and say, highlight column E, and we're gonna wanna see all the fiction books, and notice that we have fiction, 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 fiction. You can go format, conditional formatting, and you can say, I want it to be, you know, orange, format cell if the text contains fiction. Oops, I gotta spell too, fiction. And so now we're coding everything that has fiction in it, right? So not fantasy. You can see that it's starting to code. Or if we say it needs to be exactly fiction, and then that'll take out nonfiction and some of the other things, and then we'll go from there and we'll make it like real crazy. So you could format based off of words as well. So if you wanted to make it visually attractive based off of words, you can do that. Lots of stuff that you can do with conditional formatting. I'm going to take you over to a quick spreadsheet just to show you sort of a realistic use of this. One of the things I do at Streetsboro is the transportation department. We run sort of a master spreadsheet of all of the athletic trips that we take with our buses. And I use lots and lots and lots of conditional formatting in order to make it happen. And so you can see that it takes a while to load. It's a very large spreadsheet. It's got lots of columns in it, right? And I do a lot of things in here, but essentially green then tells me that they're bid out, they're ready to go. We're able to send those trips. Yellow, nothing has happened yet. We haven't bid them out. And then there's a couple other colors. If we don't have the information, then it'll show up in red, and so on and so forth. So that's sort of a real world use of that. So that's a little bit about formatting and conditional highlighting or conditional formatting. Again, you got to spend some time with it. Think about like, here's what I want to try to do. I want to try to make it easy. I want to highlight test scores or assessment data from high to low. You can do that. I want to do assessment data based on sort of proficiency levels. So I know that we do some with like, you're in a blue group, you're in the red group, you're in the yellow group. You could do all of that. And you can basically say, if the score is within, 30 to 50, it's blue. If it's from 50 to 70, it's green. If it's from, 70 to 100, it's going to be red, whatever it is that you want it to do. Let's go to split. Sometimes we get data. So we're going fast and furious here. Sometimes we get data from assessments that is from a vendor, and we get it in what's called the comma separated value, or a CSV file. So we get it with a bunch of commas in between. The tricky thing there is that I see a lot of people working with that data, and they tend to retype it. I worked in a different district where they literally had the CSV file on one screen, and then they were retyping it in a spreadsheet, when in fact, a Google spreadsheet and an Excel sheet will do the same thing. It understands what the data is and will happily split it out for you. So here, the Sally Whitaker, Belinda Jamison, they all live in A1, A2, A3. And so I'll drag it over here so we can see it. In B, I want it to just split all that data out in the, so I'm going to use the split command. I'm going to say equals split, and it's going to say select the cell that you want to split. And then remember, it tells you how to do it. And so it's asking for a delimiter. So the delimiter is, tell me where to split it. And in this case, the delimiter is going to be a comma. So I put that in, and I put the end parentheses in, and it just takes it and it'll split it out. And then of course I can repeat that formula here. And so now I get all of my data split out into separate cells. And so instead of having to copy, paste, retype, things like that, the concatenate puts it all together, right? And the split splits it all apart. So just know, and even if you don't walk away with kind of like, oh yeah, I remember how to do that, now you know that it's possible. So there you go. The one school I worked in, they spent about 3 weeks taking 700 test records, putting it into an Excel sheet, and I happened to just walk by and I said, oh, you're looking at some CSV data and you need it into cells. I said, here, boom, 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 done. And so we did something that normally takes them 3 weeks in 15 seconds. And that's huge. It's also threatening because now you're kind of threatening folks that do that, and that's the old way versus the new way. So you have to be careful, but just know that you can almost do anything that you need to do in a spreadsheet. Let's go. I want to show you one more thing that I don't think I have ready here. So I'm going to show you anyway. So we talked earlier in a session about Google Forms and about getting bad data. And so I'm going to show you how that works. So sometimes, and I'll zoom in here, sometimes when people fill in a Google form, they won't do it correctly, or they'll misspell something, or worse yet, they'll type everything in lowercase or everything in uppercase, and you want it to be sort of the way you want it to be. And so we're going to say, here's the data. Then we want it the proper way, and we want it the upper way, and we want it the lower way. Well, I guess I should do that. Easy to do that with a spreadsheet, of course. So proper means that the first letter is capitalized. So we just say, what do you want to do? I want to make something proper, equal, proper, select the cell, enter, and then multiply or sort of drag that down. I want it all in upper. And if you were on unmute, I would just ask you and you would say it's probably upper. Yep, you're right. The formula is upper. What are we selecting? A2, done, drag down. And then of course, lower over here, boom, done. We want everything lowercase. And notice then, whatever the data is that we are getting over in column A, we can then change it to however we want it to be. And so that is super, super helpful. And you can do a lot more with text this way, but just know that if you have stuff that's capitalized and you want it all in lowercase, or if you have stuff that has every letter proper and then you want it all like a regular sentence, you can do it. I even took a sentence one time. It was all sort of like every letter was capitalized or every word was capitalized. Threw it into a cell, said change it all to sort of like normal, and then we fixed it, and it was easy peasy. Off we go. Let's go to pivot data. All right, this gets a little bit tricky. So pivot data is like intermediate, advanced level, but so easy to use. So what we have here is we have a ticket type, and we have some diet restrictions, and we have the school district. And not a whole lot of diet restrictions, but we are interested in who some of these folks are. So we would like to pivot that out, as opposed to like sorting and this and that or whatever. It'd just be nice to have a nice count, for example, as opposed to having to manually count and things like that and using a bunch of formula. So pivot tables will take data that is in columns and it'll pivot it to rows. And so that's the example we're gonna use today. So I'm gonna show you how to do that. And this is one where you might wanna rewind at some point and take a look at it. But step one, if you have data in columns that's sort of good data, then it's easy to pivot stuff. So I'm gonna highlight the whole sheet, and then I'm gonna say data, and I'm gonna say create me a pivot table. I'm gonna make a new sheet. Sometimes I'll put a pivot table in the existing sheet, but I usually do a new sheet. It'll create one for you at the bottom, calling it pivot table 3 or whatever the pivot table is. And then you'll see you have rows and values. And then you get a data sorter over here to the right. Notice that you have rows, columns, values, filters. So very handy, and I'll show you here in a little bit. But we're basically going to say from this other sheet, our goal is to see, okay, where, where are all these schools? How many schools are there, right? That's what we want. So let's see, and these are tickets from a conference from 2019, I think. So we're going to say pivot table. So the first row is we're going to say school district. They're all the school districts. You don't even have to like wonder how many there are. And then the values are going to be the tickets. And so we're going to say, show me the calculated field. No, that's not what we want to do. We want to say, show me ticket type. And then it'll tell us we have 35 attendees from Aurora, we have 21 from Cuyahoga Falls, and so on and so forth. So we could do that. Or we can come in and say, don't start with the school district, but start with, we want to know how many lunch options we have. So what are the diet restrictions? Here they all are, diabetic, fish, good, right? How many? $245 have none. We have 4 diabetics, 6 gluten-free, 2 lactose, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, this is anonymized data, so we don't know who they are, but 3 vegetarians, 3 vegans, soy, salt, right? But it's helpful if you want to get that data. And this is all from here. So instead of me having to scroll through, because it's kind of a long list, right? It's like 200 and almost 275. I can pivot that out, and it helps help sort of organize things. Same thing if we wanted to do the ticket types. So we can say, take the ticket type as a row. Here are all the ticket types. And then just say values. How many are there from each school district? So we have 15, 15, 14, 13, and 181. So a quick way to deal with data, especially when it comes to numbers, things like that. Pivot tables are one of those things where it's hard to get into unless you have an actual working scenario for what it is that you want to do with it. So it's something to think about. Send us any questions that you have for sure. All right, let's end on, what time we got? 12:43. And let's see what else. Sparklines. Sparklines are a way, they're kind of fun, especially if you're into math, science, statistics, or you just want to keep track of how a student is doing visually within a cell. So a lot of people are hesitant in making bar graphs and charts and things in Google Sheets, and you can certainly do all of that, and it's pretty easy to do. But here we have a roster of students, and then we have a quarter 1, 2, 3, 4 assessment, and we want to have kind of a visual idea of how they're doing. I find that a lot of our students don't keep track themselves, and so they don't have a good idea of like, well, how am I even doing in this course? I used to teach high school social studies. I would work with juniors there in like an honors economics course, and they would be surprised sort of halfway through the year that they weren't 100% sure of what their grade was in class. And so if I were doing that now, I would have them do their own spreadsheet for sure. That was back before Google was something that was rolled out to school districts. So wouldn't it be nice if we have 87, 91, 78, 96, and we would see that visually, but we don't want to have to build sort of a graph? Sure. So equal sign, and then Sparkline. And the Sparkline will just take data, and it'll graph it inside of a cell. And so what data do you want? Well, I want this data. So I just highlight it, hit enter, and I get a nice little graph of how are they doing. And then I can, of course, drag that down and have a good idea of how they're performing. Students could do that. You could do that. You could have a quick overview of like, well, what does it look like? Well, Johnny seems to have had a sort of a strong start. Andy had a little bit of a rough quarter 3, but then came back. Mary there kind of did okay through quarter 2 and then just went downhill. Now notice that the Sparkline takes the top and the bottom number by itself. So it knows that 78 is the lowest and 96 is the highest. Whereas for Mary, 70 is going to be the lowest, right? And then 77 is going to be the highest. It's going to maximize the whole cell. You can alter that. So if you click into Sparkline, you can sort of alter that and do some other parameters if you wanted it that way. You can even make a bar graph. You can have it do all kinds of different things. Let's see. I think, let me go here. Did we miss something here? No, I think we're good. Conditional formatting, Sparkline, boom. let's go. I see some stuff in the chat here. Dan, I'm going to throw out the questions here. How did I get muted?
Sorry, I muted you by accident.
Oh, you muted me. Okay. Well, that's good. If we color code a cell from Joe, when data comes in from the Google form, can we get it to always come in with the cell color that data is ongoing coming in data? Yes. So you could do that. Now, it gets a little tricky in terms of taking data from a Google form that continues to give you data, but you could do it, and you would just like mark the whole column. Better yet, I think, would be to pivot that data. I tend to leave the spreadsheet here. I'm gonna unshare my screen here. I tend to, instead of working in the sheet that the Google form data comes into, I tend to pivot that out or sort of just grab the data that I want to work with and then color code in conditional format that. I get still a little hesitant about conditionally formatting, like formatting data in general that is coming in from a spreadsheet or coming in from a Google form is what I wanted to say. So, but yes, you can do it. Let's see. And Dan said, right. So if you wanted to do it, you could set the conditional formatting to sort of apply to the whole range. And then Google is smart enough so that say you go over that 100 rows, it'll continue adding to it. Same thing with a pivot table. So if you pivot data out and then you get new data, it'll automatically kind of extend the range of the pivot table because it knows that you just had 75 responses yesterday. Today you have 245. So it'll kind of automatically do that. So that's a good question. Brittany says, is there a copy of this presentation? Sure, absolutely. And then again, we're recording it because with spreadsheets, this is something that you're going to want to come back to and really kind of review it with the spreadsheets. My core review or core sort of recommendation is take what you need to do with spreadsheets and learn one thing. And if that's to freeze the top row in the column and to format it a little bit, fantastic. If you are never going to use the concatenate function, that's okay too. If you're never going to use the Sparkline one, that's okay too. But now you know that it's possible. So that's what I try to focus on. Like now I know that this is doable. And so now I can work that much more efficient and effective. So hope we've had a little bit of stoking your fire around spreadsheets. Dan, do you have anything else to add?
No, it was just the question I was going to ask you was sharing out the link to the spreadsheet. And so I know we're putting it on a site with all the recordings. How are people going to access that site? Is that site going to be pushed out to everyone who's registered, or how are we going to
watch this?
Or right now?
Are you ready? Go to your chat, and then here, like, boom, done. There's the site. Want to get the spreadsheet? Here it is. And we'll have that on the site as well. So your certificate of attendance is there. Recordings and resources will be there later today. And then the demo sheet right there, click and get a copy of the demo sheet that I worked in. Perfect. All right, ready to rock and roll. Thanks for hanging out with us, doing some spreadsheet stuff. Next up, let me tell you what's coming. Ooh, a real treat. 2 p.m. Google Classroom Basics with Molly Cloder. So that'll open in about 5 minutes here. Parent communication at 3, and then Gmail Basics and some new features at 4 p.m. So hope we'll see you there.